Zach, we are back for another team audit. We are looking at Keston's team, Keeson's team. I'm actually not sure how to pronounce that. I apologize if I got that wrong. But we are diving into another team audit. Always a blast getting into these with you and talking some team building strategies and things of that sort. Zach, what do you got for us when looking at the league settings? Why don't we dive into this league a little bit?
It's a 12-team league, Bob. Single quarterback, non-tight end premium. Full PPR scoring. However, roster sizes are 20, taxi squad of 4, IR size of 2. The starting roster format is start 7 plus a kicker and a defense. So not a deep roster. It's start 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex spot. And as we mentioned, a kicker and a defense, which we will not be touching upon. Current record, 7-6. It says third place finish and 5th in points overall. And again, a 12-team league here, Bob.
Looking at the team now, this is a 1 quarterback. Keep that in mind. So quarterbacks, we have Patrick Mahomes, Kyle Trask, Jordan Love. Running backs, we have Kenneth Walker, Ramondre Stevenson, A.J. Dillon, Jerick McKinnon, Kyron Williams, Chase Edmonds, and Kevin Harris. Wide receiver room, we get exciting. Jamar Chase, DK Metcalf, Garrett Wilson, Christian Watson, Elijah Moore, Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore, and David Bell. And then tight ends, we got David Njoku, Tyler Conklin, and good old Jake Ferguson. Looking at draft capital, we have the 104, the 201, and the 310 in this class. In 2024, we have 2 firsts, a second, and 2 thirds. And in 2025, we have a first, 2 seconds, and a 3rd round pick. It is noted here that he's bringing a vote to the league during the offseason to remove kicker and or defense and to add in a second flex. Doesn't change things too much. Thankfully, it's only a start 7. We're not adding like a wide receiver and 2 flexes or anything like that. You need to be a little more focused on having startable depth, but it's not a world-changing difference. We only have 7 starters now. We'd have 8 after that. So there is that to note. The other thing I want to note with this roster quick before we get into some core players, I think it's super interesting. We've been seeing a lot of rosters that are actually pretty shallow in terms of how large the overall roster is. Only having 20 roster spots, albeit in a 12-team league, there's a lot of pieces out there on the waiver wire that are arguably possibly better than some pieces we have on this team right now. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind that, already in a start 7, we're going to be very focused. And even if it ends up being a start 8, we're going to be very focused on having a strong starting lineup, not worrying about depth, because you're more than likely going to be able to find stuff out on the waiver wire pretty consistently. And while obviously it's out on the waiver wire, it's probably not going to be an earth-shattering pickup, but there are going to be guys like, for example, Zay Jones was probably out on the waiver wire in this league. Could have helped you a fair bit down the stretch this season. With all that in the books, with the team in the books, now that we know what we're looking at, Zach, why don't you dive into some core players you're building around that you're not looking to trade off this team?
My core players are Mahomes, Kenneth Walker, Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, and DK Metcalf, but I listed those wide receivers in order of which ones I'm trading like the least. So sure. Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, DK Metcalf, because this is a start 7, possibly start 8. That means you need top of the top talent at all positions, which I think you have at wide receiver. But if you have to give one to say acquire another top running back, that's the list in which I'm not doing it. I'm not moving Jamar Chase if I can help it. I'd really not move Garrett Wilson if I could help it. And DK Metcalf, while it'd be ideal to build around him, if you had to include DK Metcalf in a trade to get something done, I would do it. However, I am putting the caveat here that I am putting him in my core players as I'd like to build the team around him.
And I can agree with all that. I don't think I'm looking to move these guys. I think we can fill this starting roster other ways without kind of compromising this core group of players. So I hear you. I get where you're at, and I definitely tend to agree on all accounts. Let's talk team needs, team trajectory. Looking at the team, where are we headed? Is this a team competitive now? Does it need a full rebuild, a slight retooling? Or are we looking to compete right now? What does this team need to focus on to win a championship, get from where we are to get to that championship? Zach, why don't you talk about team needs, team trajectory? What does this team need? Where's it going? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, it was a semi-competitive team already. And you see the young core foundational pieces of it. And I see what Keston's saying there, that I just don't see a need to trade any of them away. Like I listed before, if you have to trade a DK Metcalf, okay. But I'm not trading the fundamentals of this team. I'm not trading Patrick Mahomes in a 1 quarterback league, because super flex, maybe. But let me explain in 1 quarterback leagues. If you have Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, and maybe Jalen Hurts is entering this conversation, if you have one of those two, every week you are winning that category. Every week you're winning at the quarterback position with a Patrick Mahomes. If you have, say, a Justin Herbert, he may have the talent to be a top 5 quarterback, but you are still losing at the quarterback spot in a start 7 at that spot every single week. So I'm not trading away my young depth whatsoever, and I just wanted to address that because he asked it. This team, in my opinion, needs another starting running back. I don't trust Ramondre Stevenson. He may be great. I never trust New England Patriot running backs. It's just a philosophy of mine. Damian Harris was a top 10 running back last year, and he was RB 47 this year. I never trust them, and I wouldn't feel good about building my team around Ramondre Stevenson. And in my opinion, this team needs a top-tier tight end as well. David Njoku, nice. I think you could win a championship with David Njoku. It's just hard when you're only starting 7. There are 7 better tight ends than David Njoku, so you'd be losing hypothetically almost every single week. So for me, you need a running back, you need a tight end.
I think with the team trajectory, I think this team can absolutely compete. Like you said, we were competitive enough last year. We just need to make some small tweaks. This makes it a small retooling. Just need to focus on a couple, premier areas. I think you touched on it beautifully with, the Patrick Mahomes concept of if you have Patrick Mahomes, almost every week you're winning that position. And then if you can now do that with tight end and get a competent tight end in there, Njoku, not my favorite piece to have. I'll discuss on who I'm going to target at the tight end position in a little bit. But if you can win that position too, have your bookends locked down with what you have in the middle of your lineup, the quote unquote meat and potatoes of your lineup with wide receivers, you have a tough team to beat outside of your RB2 and your tight end slot. We're going to work on those today, I think, quite a bit. Let's get into some potential transactions. He did have a note for us that he'd like to acquire Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, or James Conner. I am not going to be advocating for Joe Mixon or James Conner. I just don't think the value or the, what they're putting up production wise. And, James Conner age is playing a role at this point. I know he had, somewhat of an okay season, but I'm going to avoid those two. I like the idea of buying Breece Hall, but not for this season. I am concerned with that ACL tear we see every year, more often than not. Running backs coming back from an ACL, not always an awesome return, but might be somebody that you can make that mental note to go try to acquire towards the end of the season. Might be able to, put up some decent weeks for you on the end of the season, but also he might be more of a value after a disappointing start to the season where you can get him for 2024 on somewhat of a discount. I don't hate buying Barkley or Jonathan Taylor. I just think it's going to be very, very expensive to do so. And he does have actually a potential trade for Jonathan Taylor kind of in the works that we'll discuss when we get to rookie targets and rookie draft strategy and things of that note. Why not we get right into this one? Zach, if you have anything to touch on with those running backs that he's kind of looking at, feel free to dive in. Otherwise, just go ahead, talk cuts, trade pieces, targets, all of that fun stuff.
Well, first of all, let me address that note there. When we get these team audits, we get a sheet and we get the information from you guys. And I read that line. I'd like to acquire one of Saquon, Joe Mixon, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, James Conner. And I said, no. I just said no. Because exactly what you said there. It's going to cost you too much. Again, start 7 means everybody needs top tier end talent. And I just don't think that if you overpay for one of these players, that you're automatically in a position to compete. You still have a hole at tight end. You still have areas that need to be addressed. And if you give away your depth in terms of draft capital, or you give away your depth in terms of those 3 starting wide receivers, I don't think it necessarily makes you overall better and a champion, because you're already a good team. You're already a good team. So we need to make a move that makes you a champion contender. So none of that was acquiring a running back on that list. Now, I did address the running back position in my trade targets. My potential trade targets are with Christian Watson and the 104, 101. Now, I plugged that into the DLF trade calculator and it worked. I'm not saying it gets the job done, but I think it gets you close to the conversation if that owner is interested in Christian Watson or potentially moving back, because you're not going to start Christian Watson. I don't necessarily believe in the long-term stretch of Christian Watson. We just talked about him in one of our videos recently with trade targets, where You even said yourself that he, or maybe it was Mike, that you looked at his production and it all came in a 1 month capsule. Yep. And you're not sure if he's better or not with Aaron Rodgers there or not. So I'm not really attached to Christian Watson. So I attached him and the 104 to try to move up to 101. If that doesn't work, I just looked at the trade calculator, plugged in Christian Watson, and J.K. Dobbins' name came up as a name that you could try to acquire. That's a name that I trust more than Ramondre Stevenson. I know that Ramondre's production was better last year, but I trust JK's talent more than I trust Ramondre's talent. I'm again trying to move up in the draft to try to acquire one of those top 2 running backs. And I packaged 104 and 201 to get 102 and a potential 3rd round pick. If you just have to take it for 102, fine. But we always talk about this channel, ask for the extra piece. And so ask for the extra piece. But if the owner says no, 102 only, take it. Because you can then get Jahmyr Gibbs, address that running back 2 that you need on your team. And I think you're in a much better position than overpaying for a Saquon Barkley or a Jonathan Taylor, in my opinion.
Cuts for me, and you have 2 of these guys as well, Kevin Harris and Chase Edmonds. You had his cuts. I also have those guys. I also have Kyle Trask. Whether he's the quarterback or not, don't really care. I don't see him as being in a 1 quarterback really worth having. Kyron Williams, another guy that I think we've seen enough of nothing to really, I'm willing to kind of move on at this point. A guy I liked, I was rooting for, just wasn't able to get going in that, albeit a terrible Rams offense towards the end of the season. But talking trades, I got Darnell Mooney plus the 201, plus Tyler Conklin to kind of replace the tight end you're getting. TJ Hawkinson is my target, and that is my number 1 tight end trade target this offseason. I want everything to do with TJ Hawkinson. If I don't have Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson is the next man on my list. And there are some cases where you could make pivots down from both of those guys and get TJ Hawkinson plus. And I'm strongly considering that depending on the team situation and build. That came out as fair value, and it actually came out as a small overpay, especially adding Tyler Conklin. Before you even add Tyler Conklin into the mix, just to give, if they're, say, TJ Hawkinson is their only tight end and their backup is Isaiah Likely, for example, Tyler Conklin gives you something to work with, and maybe that 201 is somebody you can draft with there too. There's going to be a tight end more than likely kicking around there. The move up or the pivot I have is the 104 plus 310 plus the 24 third to move 1 spot to that 103. I think you could try shooting for that 102 because it gives you your choice between either having JSN or Gibbs to pick from. I think more than likely you're going to try to pick Gibbs to get the running back that you need on this team, and in some circles would be regarded as the better player. And then lastly, to try to improve this wide receiver room that much more and buy lower-ish on a player that I think is still, not really being talked about enough, Elijah Moore and Rondale Moore, the Moores, get you more in Jahan Dotson. So I'm going to try to make that move if I can. I think once DeAndre Hopkins leaves town, maybe we get a coach in there in Arizona. Again, at the time of recording, we still have no head coach in Arizona. Rondale Moore could get a little buzz when D-Hop leaves town. I'm looking to try to make that move and take advantage of somebody willing to take that extra piece on the chin for me, and I get what I believe is a far superior player in that scenario. Moving on to rookie targets, rookie draft strategy. He does have a note for us. I do have a draft strategy in mind for the 104. If JSN is gone by then, I might have the opportunity to trade that pick for Travis Etienne. Apparently the owner has fallen out of favor and doesn't value him highly at all. I'd love to make that deal. If you can't move up, and if you can't secure Gibbs or JSN, I love the idea of getting Travis Etienne possibly plus for the 104 pick. I think Etienne is better than every other running back in this draft class, more than likely. There's some guys that have a lot of potential, but I've seen enough from Etienne in the NFL to believe in him over those guys at this point. I'm also mulling the idea of trading both my 24 firsts for Jonathan Taylor. And he does say he does have a verbal agreement with that manager, but the trade would have to wait until the draft or early 2023 to see if he has a shot this season. I guess he was rebuilding. He went and acquired a bunch of picks. He's waiting to see if he's still competing. That verbal agreement to me isn't much. I would actually be willing to take those 2 first that you still have and you have this verbal agreement with. Just go get the deal done. Add somebody like A.J. Dillon to try to help mull this offer over and get it done with. And I'd rather just secure Jonathan Taylor now and just try to cut out this verbal agreement, because a verbal agreement means nothing in Dynasty. It's worth absolutely nothing. Until there's a trade offer in your inbox or a trade is accepted, there is little to nothing there of value. But I'd love it if you could go get Jonathan Taylor, especially after this draft, only moving 24 first and possibly AJ Dillon. I'll still take Jonathan Taylor over that. I'd love if you get ETN for that 104 as well. I'm a big fan of that. Zach, feel free to touch on any of that, or just dive right on into rookie targets and rookie draft strategy.
I think in the hierarchy of things I'd like to get done, the top of that list would be Travis Etienne, because it requires no additional capital to acquire Travis Etienne. If you're trading for Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan Robinson, you're giving up Christian Watson, you're giving up the 201. If I'm just getting straight up Travis Etienne for who we talked about, Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison, I would do that in a heartbeat. The other thing that we did not know is that the owner of 102 and 101 are the same person. Yeah. So we know now that that deal is going to have to wait till draft day based on what you just said. I'm not doing that. Values change, things change. The draft is going to look a lot different in April and May than it does today. A year ago, Christian Watson was a 3rd-round rookie pick and Sky Moore was a 4th-round rookie pick. These things change, and I think your best bet is just, boom, we got Travis Etienne. We don't have to worry about the 104. We've got our RB2 locked in. Can we use Ramondre now to acquire a tight end? Something like that. To me, if you can get Travis Etienne for the 104, that is clean. It's simple, and it solves your problem right away. If, however, this team had to use a draft pick instead of trade for Travis Etienne, my end goal is Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs. Everything else is bust at that point. You know, JSN is nice. You're still not starting JSN unless you add 2 flex spots at this point. That would be my goal, which seems like it could be difficult because the owner of those picks is the same person. He has 101, 102, 103, and he's waiting until the draft to make a decision, which I think is the right call. If I cannot do that, if I cannot acquire a Travis Etienne, I'm probably trading back. I might go after Michael Mayer, Dalton Kincaid, Luke Musgrave, one of these guys, take a shot and still try to acquire another tight end some way, somehow, and get more 2024 draft capital, because right now, 2024 draft capital is cheap. But 6 months from now, 3 months from now, after your rookie draft, the value of a 24 draft pick skyrockets, and you can use that in a trade for a TJ Hawkinson. Having that flexibility to make a move in the preseason is where you really want to be if you're one piece away, which I think if you acquire a running back or you acquire a tight end in the rookie draft, you're one piece away from really competing for a championship, in my opinion. So it's one of those top 2 running backs or bust for me at this point.
Yeah, I don't know how much I love adding the rookie tight end in honor of just trying to compete this year. Like, yeah, Njoku might be able to put up enough, and then you have a guy cooking for next year. That's my only 2 cents there. Otherwise, yeah, I would like to get the 2 running backs more than anything. If you can get to 101 somehow, especially using that 101 for Watson plus the 104, I'm pretty happy with that. You might be able to trade that 104 for someone like Josh Jacobs as well, another guy everybody just seems to love to hate. That's another option as well. But for me, like you said, go get one of these top running backs, you know, in a reasonable fashion. And if you don't get the Jonathan Taylor deal done, having those 24 first pocketed so you can go make a move in the season, you know, and not necessarily even just the preseason, but, you know, down the stretch of the season when people are, you know what, I'm out of it. They'll have pieces that you can throw these 24 firsts at to get, you know, and they're not going to be, you're not going to be getting like Chris Olave or, you know, pieces like that. You're going to be getting guys like not quite to that level. Like you'll be able to get a TJ Hawkinson probably at that point if somebody's, you know, really struggling. And that 24 first you have maybe looks like a mid first or, you know, not necessarily the latest first in the round. Like I've kind of alluded to or said before, it makes 0 sense in a 1 quarterback to stay at 104. There's a clear tier break, in my opinion, between 103 and 104. I think there's good players still at 104, like good players, but as I've said a lot, at 104, the difference between 104 and 108 or 109 is very, very minimal. And I think at that point, you're just getting to pick your guy, but ultimately you're just picking from a sea of guys that is just, you know, all similar values, similar production. You just get to take your pick of the litter. I'll take whatever value I can trading back or trading out. Go get Josh Jacobs, go get ETN. We both really like that idea. You know, there's no reason, you know, if Gibbs, JSN, and obviously Bijan go off the board, there's no reason to sit there and draft somebody. Trade down or trade out. One of the two options would be better than drafting Jordan Addison, who I like, or any of these other players who we like. At the end of the day, running back has to be a focus, and I think you can do it. You have a bevy of ways to attack that. Before we get out of here, Zach, what are your closing thoughts for this one, for Keston's team? What do you got for him locked and loaded to take with him down the road?
I feel like Keston knows what he needs to do, just based off the notes that he provided to us, the feedback that he gave to us, which is really good. If you're submitting an audit, it's like you might have just needed that friend to be like, yeah, you're right,
Right.
Because don't make any of these trades giving up your young talent, but you do have some young depth at wide receiver that you could use for trades. But I'm not giving up Kenneth Walker. I'm not giving up Patrick Mahomes. I'm probably not giving up Jamar Chase in a league that you need the top end talent in basically a start 7. You're right, man. And you've done well so far. You've amassed a solid young roster. You've got 4 first-round picks the next 3 seasons. You've got a couple of second-round picks you can maneuver with as well. All I'll say is, like we've touched on, if you can't get one of those 2 running backs in the draft, add more capital for next year, because at some point you will be able to. And it could be as soon as the preseason. Like I said, somebody snaps an ACL, that destroys somebody's team. And you could be there to, hey, I have an extra 24 first if you want it. That's all I can say. This is a good build. It's a great foundation. It's on the right path. It was 3rd place finish last year in his league. Made some noise in the playoffs, so you're on the right track here.
100% agreed. Fixing whatever you can to get that running back 2 sorted, or at least more stable. I do kind of like Ramondre Stevenson. He's somebody I'm holding on to in most spaces, unless I'm getting blown away with an offer. But tight end to me really needs to be something that we look at, because I think that you're just going to be behind at least one position most weeks. There are a lot of better tight ends than David Njoku, and obviously Tyler Conklin, and maybe Jake Ferguson gets a starting role. I don't see it happening. Being in that pitfall, if you don't have running back 2 fully sorted, that's going to be a bit of a question mark. But all in all, this team has a lot of solid pieces to build around. I'm fairly positive on Christian Watson's outlook as well. He's somebody I'm willing to move, though. Obviously, I'm willing to move the Moores and Mooney. David Bell is kind of a sinking asset on your team. Let's say team has a lot of potential and can definitely make some noise. And I think when you have so many directions you can go, that's when it's the most overwhelming to have. There's no like one track way for this team. I think the biggest thing to note, though, is with it being a start 7, possibly 8 soon, it's still a flex spot that you're adding, not a positional group, so you don't have to focus on any one position to build around to fill that flex. Roster size of 20, focus on the high-end talent. Get as much high-end talent as you can. If you have to overspend a little bit to go get higher end pieces, do it, because at the end of the day, you want to win a championship, and it's going to be worth it to do that in this format. Fill in the gaps with waiver wire pieces. People get off, when it's a bye week injury, whatever the case is, go fill that hole with a waiver wire ad, because that's going to be easier to do and more worthwhile in the end when you're in the playoffs and you have these top 5 people at their respective positions going against another team that's probably similar caliber. You don't need these, you don't need, let's say, for example, Elijah Moore probably ain't doing you a whole heck of a lot. Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore, especially when you have guys like Jamar Chase, Metcalf, and Garrett Wilson, if they're provided they're all healthy. Well, that is it for this audit today. I do hope you all enjoyed. Please leave a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the audit itself. What did you think of the video, and what advice would you offer in this Dynasty Rebuild? And what questions do you have regarding Dynasty Rebuilds? If you want to have your team featured in a Dynasty Rebuild video, you can check out patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind, or you can hit up the YouTube description box below for more details. If you are rebuilding, it's very important to have the right strategies in place and avoid very common mistakes. For just that, check out the 2 videos on your screen now. Make sure you have the right strategy in place and avoid those very common mistakes. But hey, that's going to be it for us today. We will see y'all in the next one, but until then, y'all have a good one.